Hello there, my name is Sixo, but more on that later. Someone's only gone and made a new Optimus Prime toy, haven't they? Yes, not content with already having 3 official Masterpiece versions of the guy, we've now got third parties taking a shot at him too, which brings us to this effort from Transform Element. Yes, my friends, it's prime time once again. TE-01 Op Leader is one of several relatively new third-party attempts at a Masterpiece-styled and cartoon-accurate take on the iconic Autobot leader himself. It's Optimus Prime. This figure has received a lot of hype since its release, with many collectors raving about its good looks and quality build, not to mention the way it brings the animation model of the character to life. Optimus Prime is of course the most well-known character from the Transformers franchise, which is perhaps unsurprising given his status as commander of the good guys and as one of the main protagonists of the original cartoon. Some of his most notorious moments also occurred in the 1986 big-screen animated adventure The Transformers the Movie, with Optimus's grisly fate arguably only boosting his legendary status in pop culture. In fact, Optimus is such a pivotal character in the mythos that he's naturally quite an important one to get right in any collection. Although he's been done in the official Masterpiece line several times over, I can't wait to see what Transform Element have up their sleeve for today. Last thing before we begin, today's video comes courtesy of TF Source, so I'll put a link to their site in the video description. The plan for today is to give you my first impressions before getting a full photo review up on their blog soon. Okay, and here is Transform Element Op Leader in the box. Or is it OP Leader? I really don't know actually. I've been saying Op Leader, but whatever you prefer. Anyway, it's got some character artwork on the front and some promo shots on the back. So yeah, very straightforward box, and indeed, no tape on this one either. Just go ahead and open him up. There is a polystyrene inner casing, however. There you go. So that's keeping the toy nice and safe, we hope. And some instructions just there as well. Ooh, and it's cool branded polystyrene as well. How's that? And here's the toy. Well, also included in the box, first off, you've got this gun, which is a very nice recreation of Optimus's rifle just there. Looks really, really good. And this one has a bit of a light-up gimmick as well. It's just got this button at the rear just there. And battery's already included, so I like that. That's about the only time that I actually ever use light-up gimmicks, but there you go. Also included is this Energon axe, which is a reference that you already know where this one comes from. Look, every Masterpiece-styled Optimus Prime since the day of whatever has included these, so there you go, it's there. You've got this little piece which looks like a trailer hitch for a trailer that isn't included here from the markings just there from the indents. I think it's for MP10's trailer. You've got this little baggie with some screws and a screwdriver, not sure why, but there you go. And you get this little extra head, which is, let's be honest, chef's kiss levels of perfection. And that's your lot. And yeah, compared to MP-44 Optimus Prime Convoy, the official Masterpiece, you know, it's very light on accessories. But actually, I get the feeling that a lot of people are going to prefer that. Let's be fair. I've already seen various positive comments about that and, you know, keeping the price down versus MP-44, which comes with a whole load of stuff and is a lot more expensive compared to this guy. So, you know, bang for your buck, I guess. And right out the box, this guy presents pretty nicely indeed. In fact, I've seen quite a few pictures of this guy online where either myself or someone else has confused it with MP-44. And it's not hard to see why, as it does look suitably Masterpiece-y right off the bat. I mean, big animation vibes from this guy, right? Like very blocky kind of look to it, very smooth detailing, you know, not much kind of greebling going on in the sculpt or anything like that. You know, block colors. It's classic G1 cartoon Optimus Prime, no doubt. I mean, I love these chest windows. That looks really, really nice. The little yellow paint on here is very much appreciated and looks nice and crisp. I think the color of blue they've used is, it's lovely actually, really nice in hand, a kind of babyish blue, and it does catch the light quite nicely and kind of has this nice sort of shimmer to it. I think it's great. Now, particularly in certain lights, it is quite easy to see some of the detailing going on underneath, so, you know, whether you like that or not, I guess it's kind of up to you. I don't mind it. There is this one little circle just there that actually is quite prominent, kind of looks like a nipple, if anything, but, you know, that's something that we've seen on previous Masterpiece Primes too, particularly on MP1, actually. That was really, really prominent. But it's kind of cool that you can see a little bit of the kind of robotic detailing underneath, I think. Coming a bit further down, you've got that grille section there, very shiny, catches the light nicely, of course. That looks really good. And then you've got this very flat kind of hip section just there, which is something that seems to be kind of a bit of a variance in terms of how different toys interpret how it looks, you know, from the cartoon. cartoon. I think this one actually does it quite well. You know, it's got this very blocky, flat yellow look to it. You know, a little bit of kind of visible hip skirtage going on, but we'll check that out with articulation in just a bit. Legs, very clean, very animation styled, yet again, no visible wheels on the side or anything like that. So, you know, they've really kind of gone to town to make that look as polished as possible and as kind of anime accurate as possible as well. It's got some big old chunky feet, which I really like. The only thing that I will say, I have clocked already that you can't fan this guy out at the hips, his legs out at the hips slightly. So if you want him kind of, you know, with the legs slightly sort of splayed like that, you know, which I think is a more neutral standing stance, you know, for figures just sort of stood on a shelf or whatever. You never have their feet kind of stood exactly parallel, because that just looks a bit weird or a bit stoic somehow. Actually, you just have to do that with the knee and kind of turn it at the knee, which is a little bit of a visual break, but it is what it is. Coming around to the rear of the legs and you'll see just how clean they are. I mean, there's really no visible kibble at all. It's very, very impressive. Probably the one bit of this whole guy that is a bit of a break from the animation model is the bum, which, you know, I can't say that I've spent countless hours studying Optimus's bum. I really haven't, but you know, this bit looks a little bit more kind of bumpery than that area tends to look, I think. But you know, still, it's pretty clean. It's fine. And then coming up to the top of his back, and I think this is the bit that people that love this toy are very quick to rave about, and justifiably so, because, you know, if we take him for a little spin round, you'll see that that is exceptionally clean, really very tidy indeed, particularly in comparison to MP-44, which of course does have quite the backpack going on. I do like MP-44 a lot, but it's, you know, it's only fair to say that there is a backpack, and I think this actually is probably about what people would have expected of that toy in terms of how, you know, tidy it is, generally speaking. So they've done a really nice job with that. And you know, I can totally get why people think that that looks better. We'll do some comparisons in a little bit. To their credit, it's actually quite cartoon accurate as well. It's kind of got that tapered down look that you do get on the animation model. And you know, even these bits on the side, these little kind of molded sections, little cylinders or whatever they are on his back, you know, they're grey on the animation model, but still they are molded here. And I think, you know, maybe they could have painted them, but I'm guessing that would have been a bit of an issue in terms of, you know, paint scratching off or, you know, whatever else. So actually, I think props to them for doing that. I think that looks, you know, it's appreciated that they've kind of included that little nod just in there. There are some visible screws and things like that going on the arms just there, but it, you know what, it really doesn't bother me. It's on the back of the figure, it's fine. Well, and the smokestacks look pretty cool too. They've, I think they are metal. If I can sort of sense that, there's a slight cold touch to them, so that's nice. And they do look very tidy. I really like how they're positioned as well. And then of course you've got this little shoulder section just here, which would have an Autobot logo, but they've given you, I think, enough room to include one. Probably not as sizable as you would normally expect to see on Optimus's shoulder. He is the Autobot leader after all, so one would typically think that you would go for quite a large Autobot logo on there, but it's kind of a small, smooth space, so I don't really know that you'll be able to get a very large one on there. On the whole then, very, very impressive looking toy indeed. As soon as you take it out of the box, it's not hard to be impressed with how it looks. Now, the main area that it does deviate from MP-44 is in the finish, where, you know, that is kind of loaded in paint. This guy is not. So a lot of bare red plastic going on, you know, bare blue plastic as well. And that's not bad, you know, that's really not bad. And actually some people may prefer that because of course one of the main concerns with 44 has been paint chipping, particularly in areas, you know, mine has got a slight chip on the sort of grey section just here. So actually, you know, maybe you like the idea of this guy just being bare plastic because, you know, it's a bit safer or whatever. But yeah, still, I think he presents really nicely. Now, one thing we've definitely got to talk about are those heads, because the stock head that you get on here is very nice, actually. I like it quite a bit. As I've already indicated, you know, there is another head in the box, which I'm quite pro. I'm definitely going to be swapping them out, but actually the one that comes on the toy, this guy, looks really nice too. I think it's a slightly more stylized take on Prime, but you know, as with MP-44, which comes with two heads as well, you know, it's all in reference to the cartoon, because Optimus does have several looks. You know, he varies very much from one scene to the next in terms of how he appears, and so they've just replicated that here. And you know, for my part, I actually think that this head looks really decent. I will admit, to start with, I was kind of, from pictures, I was less sure, but actually in hand, it's good. I really like it, but I am still definitely going to be swapping it out. Now, of course, you will have to unscrew the head to get it off, which is, you know, obviously what they've included a little screwdriver for. And then it seems to be quite a weird one, because this little back section comes off, for one thing, and then actually the front of the head comes off as well. And it just leaves you with these little 2 antennae just on there, which is very strange. And then it's just a question of actually like building the spare head onto the neck, which is really weird. I just thought that you'd, take it off, put the new one on, job done. But no, you've actually got to kind of build it. And so you've got to get the antenna on first, because that's actually how the whole head is pegged on, is where those clip onto the neck. Very strange solution. And I do think that, there we go, just put the front of the head on like that. I do think that you're going to need to be super careful with those antennae, because they feel quite thin to me. And then you want to get the back of the head on, like so. Won't go flush. I'll get it right. There we go. Yeah, baby, she's got it. Right, and then let's get the screw back in. So yeah, I would just advise a little bit of caution with those antennae. They feel quite flimsy to me. I feel like they're going to get bent if people are not careful. And then just fold the little head down, and there we go. Job's a good one. And there we go. And honestly, as I've already said, that is just glorious. Absolutely glorious head sculpt that is. Really reminds me of the 1986 movie. I think it's very evocative of Prime's kind of, slightly more square-jawed, angular look to it that he's sporting in that film. And it really works for me. I gotta say, it's sort of vibing with me quite heavily. I can almost hear choirs of angels singing as I look at this thing. So yeah, I just would be careful with those antennae. I already feel like this one on mine is getting slightly bent just from handling it and kind of trying to get the head on. So do be careful. But purely from an aesthetic point of view, it's hard to argue, right? That looks very cartoon, classic cartoon Optimus Prime. Love it. Now, in terms of articulation, there is quite a bit at the head. You can look quite far up. Can't really look down at all, just kind of forward. But head can go all around as well. Now, in terms of the arms, shoulders feel very strong and clicky, obviously on a ratchet, and they go out about 90 degrees to the side, just like that, and obviously can go all the way over. There is a bicep swivel, which goes all the way around, and an elbow bend, which will get you to quite a bit past 90 degrees, so that's quite good. There is also quite a weird joint out to the side like that at the elbow, but that's clearly for transformation. And then at the hands, you've got a wrist swivel, obviously, nearly said waist. And then you've got individually articulated fingers. Well, actually, these 3 are all on one molded piece, but they've got 2 points of articulation in that finger. Same 2 points in this one, but the forefinger is separate. And then there is articulation in a couple of points at the thumb as well. There's a waist swivel, and I don't believe any ab crunch. Now, in terms of the hips, of course, you've got these hip flaps just there, so you'll need to fold those up if you want the legs to go all the way forward. It does have hip skirts at the side as well, but they're attached at the back, so they don't really fan out at all. In fairness, you don't really need them to. There's enough clearance there if you just kind of move it a little bit for the leg to go out, a solid 90 degrees at the side. And then that's very strong ratchets at the hips just there, and that goes all the way forward 90 degrees as well, no more. Then at the knee, you've got very strong ratchets again, and that goes past 90 degrees as so. And there is an ankle tilt, which works from this little slider at the side, as you can see, just like that. Quite stiff to start with, but it kind of loosens off a little bit. And then there is some toe articulation as well, like that, for kind of a leaning forward pose or whatever else, and a little bit back the other way. Which all kind of means that he is fairly articulated, but if anything, probably about the standard amount, that you would kind of expect for a Masterpiece style figure of this kind. It's nothing particularly spectacular, and actually he does feel a little bit more kind of solid, I guess, sort of in terms of how he articulates than MP-44. Particularly as, that figure is exceptionally posable, really very lithe, can kind of move around, got great range of motion. So this guy does feel a little bit more static, I suppose is the word that I might use compared to that. But still, it poses quite nicely. I've managed to get it into a kneel. I'm not entirely convinced it's the most natural looking thing in the world, but it can do it. Of course, you've got this hip skirt that does fold up, which, as some people will know, is not my favorite. And the solution for that on MP-44 is really slick. So that's definitely something that toy has that's slightly favorable, but overall, this is good. Of course, what you're going to want to do now is get that gun into his hand, and that is just the old traditional peg in palm method, like so. Now, with that gun in place, he does look really, really nice. It's very classic Optimus Prime fare, as I say, and it's hard to imagine that many people, if you've opted for this guy over MP-44, that you're going to be significantly disappointed, because, it may not have the sort of same degree of articulation or some of the, more nuanced articulation that toy has, but still, it's got everything you need, and it looks brilliant. And to this thing's credit, you don't see a lot of third-party toys that actually, in my mind anyway, really capture the essence of the character that I feel like this guy does. Straight off the bat, straight out of the box, you're like, oh, well, it's Optimus Prime. And not just from a kind of, facsimile point of view, where it kind of, you know, the vague details are right. It's got the kind of essence of the character, you know, the kind of real look and feel of it down pat, and I think that's to their credit. I do think that light up feature looks really, really good as well. I'm not normally a big one for light up features, light up gimmicks actually, but when they work nicely, like this one, and the batteries are included out the box, then I'm always a big fan. And actually, you know what, on the whole, this guy just looks great. I'm super impressed, and he feels very nicely made as well. You know, it feels like a quality product. This is the kind of thing that honestly, if you didn't know it was third party, you know, and it had an Autobot logo on it, you could honestly just take it out the box and just be very happy with it. It feels that good. And you know, so many people have recommended this figure to me. It's just so funny. You know, I've obviously had MP-44 since release. I do really like it, and you know, there are definitely elements straight off the bat, and we'll do a comparison in a minute, as I say, where I could tell you that MP-44 I think is slightly more graceful, but you know what? I think this is an excellent option too, and I think if this is, you know, if you're going to bat for this guy and saying this is my Masterpiece Optimus Prime, all credit to you, because you've chosen a good toy from what I can see so far. You know, it definitely has the look down. Quality wise, it feels really good. And you know, yes, it might be a little bit more stiff and whatever than the official toy, but still, it's excellent. Well, let's check out this axe accessory, and of course you're going to clip it over his wrist. Now to do that, you want to fold his hand away in the same way that you would for transformation, and this, I just had a little practice with it, and it is way more difficult than it looks, because you kind of got to, yeah, I've already lost it. You kind of got to fold the hand in such a specific way to get it inside that arm that it's not even funny. So I think that's kind of it. You kind of compact it up like that and then fold it down, and yeah, it all kind of clips in. That took me a lot longer than it did on video, I can assure you. The instructions don't really tell you too much. And one thing I will say is that then actually, this is a bit silly, is that because it's so tightly packed, it kind of slightly impedes the arm joint. I mean, you can feel it pushing against it, so it's not the most elegant design. Anyway, the hand's away, and it exposes this little thing there that you can kind of just go ahead and plug the axe onto like so. And that's the axe in place, and you know, it looks perfectly good, perfectly good. I'm just a little bit bored of these because they've been including them in the official toys since the beginning, but still this one does look nice. You know, catches the light nicely. It's got this kind of translucent quality to it. It's really good. It doesn't rotate at all or turn at the wrist joint, so it is sort of statically you know, posed in place like that, kind of looking down, but that's fine. And yeah, it does the job. You know, in terms of a reference to an oddly specific part of children's animation from almost 40 years ago, it's a good look. I really like it. I just think it's so funny that they keep homaging this one scene. I know it's like, it's a big deal, that scene, the old Sherman Dam scene, but still, it's just funny to me. I don't know why. But you know, I always do this. It was the same with MP-44. I always make the same critique, like, oh, it's another axe, oh, okay. But then 2 minutes later, I'm like posing the thing away, and I just think, yeah, that looks pretty badass. You know what is no fun though, is getting the thing off, because as soon as you go to pull it, that happens. So you just left this with this rather dubious looking nub. Yeah, no, didn't like that very much. Had to use the little screwdriver they give you to get it off in the end, just by using this little sort of peg hole there or whatever. That's a bit annoying. Now, of course, the other gimmick that this figure has is the old matrix, the old chest windows and all of that open, and really love this detailing underneath. I know I mentioned it, you know, kind of poking through the windows earlier. I think that actually looks superb. That, to my eye, is way better than 44, actually, MP-44. I think that looks a lot closer to the animation. Really nice paint on there. Really love even the little detail of this kind of little red circuitry there, this gold. That all looks superb. Really, really love it. And then you've got to flip this bit up, which is quite hard to do, but once you get it open, there's the old matrix. Again, I think they've really captured the look of all of these internal workings. Love how the matrix kind of slots in so neatly, and it just looks fabulous. Really presents very nicely indeed. Of course, you want to try and get the thing out, and that is easier said than done. I just trimmed my nails and I cannot get it. And there it is out the chest. That did take a bit of doing. Had to use a little tool in the end to get it out, because it just was not going to happen with my fingers alone. But yeah, it looks nice enough, doesn't it? I mean, here it is in comparison with MP-44's matrix, which is this one just here on the left, and this one on the right is Transform Element. And it does look a little bit different. I mean, ultimately they're all much of a muchness. I do quite like the painted finish on 44s. I think that kind of sparkles a little bit. Whereas in theory, the translucent plastic on this one is nice, but it just looks a little bit less vibrant by comparison. But overall, both pretty good. And as I say, I do definitely think that the Transform Element one looks way, way better in the chest than it does on MP-44. Never really had a problem with MP-44, but it's not the cleanest. Like, there's a lot of kind of visual detail going on there, so it's a little bit more hard to discern. Whereas this thing, you can pretty much tell what it is from across the room and see some of the details going on. So that's really nice. You know, and especially when you close them up, you know, that to me just looks like some inner robot parts, whereas that definitely evokes the look from the cartoon. So, you know, props to Transform Element, which I guess is a natural way to lead into a comparison of these two toys in total. And of course, here you've got MP-44 on the left, here you've got Transform Element, just in case you get them muddled up or whatever else. And wow, really interesting, really, really interesting, because I got to tell you, and I'm being completely honest, there's a lot to like about Transform Element here. And, you know, I'm saying that as someone that is a big official Masterpiece collector. Like, I really like this toy a lot. You know, it's taken over MP10, which I also really like for a lot of my photo shoots and things like that, because of, you know, just how heavily it kind of evokes that cartoon look of Optimus Prime. But there's a lot to be said about this guy. A lot to be said about it. I mean, ultimately, they chase the same look. You know, it's so close in so many ways. And actually, I think if you know, until you put them next to each other, in your mind's eye, they look the same in many ways. You know, I think there's a lot of it is the head sculpt, because that head sculpt between the two of them is so similar. I mean, you could almost be forgiven for thinking it was the same head sculpt. I do think that actually MP-44's head sculpt is better. That's just, you know, my opinion. I just like something about it. I think it's maybe a little bit more representative of the cartoon overall. And this guy is a little bit more beefy in terms of the proportions of their head sculpt, but it's still excellent. Do you know what I mean? Whichever way you go, for me, I'm happy. You know, coming a bit further down, obviously a lot of people don't like the kind of, I suppose you could say, the slightly messy look on MP-44, you know, with the kind of panels and whatever else, all kind of coming together to kind of form the look for the top half of the robot. And you don't get that on Transform Element. It's much cleaner overall. So in that regard, it is really good. Much more vibrant white going on MP-44, which I do like. And I do think that the hip solution there, you know, which is really good. That's much more fluid. That obviously the way it kind of raises up like that, you can see just there, you know, that kind of automatically goes into the body, that little hip skirt. So I think that's really good on MP-44, and definitely prefer that to the kind of hip assembly here on Transform Element. Do really like the little translucent plastic in this section there. And that does look a little bit unfinished to me on Transform Element, the little kind of arrow molded detail. So that's definitely nicer over here. It's a tough one, man. It's really, really tough. I feel like one area that people are just not going to be in doubt on is the side profile, because, you know, if you turn these guys, both of them like that, to the side, you can see instantly how much cleaner Transform Element is overall. Doesn't have this backpack going on, which you get on MP-44, if we're going to be really candid about it. And you know, I'll be honest, this has never bothered me in hand. It's one of those that I think in pictures can be made to look a lot more cumbersome than actually it is. In hand, it's honestly never really bothered me. Having said that, when you look at Transform Element, it's better, right? Like, in that regard, it's definitely better. It doesn't have this big backpack going on. Even if I say it's not a problem, people are going to look at that and be like, well, clearly the one on the right looks better. And obviously you've got the sound effects box in here. Yeah, I've never really used that, so that for me is not a selling point in that regard. So yeah, that's definitely one that Transform Element does better. The other thing that is worth mentioning is that as much as I like the look of the legs on MP-44, they don't feel the most stable. A lot of people have complained about the knees on this figure, obviously. I've not had any problems with mine, but, you know, generally speaking, there is this kind of feeling of, you know, slight wobble going on with him when you pick him up, whereas you don't really get the same, like a tiny bit, but certainly not to the same degree on Transform Element. It has a much more solid feel overall. Going really toe-to-toe though, where the Transform Element doesn't quite look as good as MP-44 is definitely in the painted finish, which, you know, this guy is absolutely layered in paint. It looks glorious, catches the light really nicely, it feels premium as well, you know, whereas this guy is unpainted. An unpainted red has a habit of just not looking, it doesn't look as nice, let's be honest, as when it's painted. So there is that, you know, kind of slight critique I could give to it, is that it does have that slightly just unpolished feel because of the unpainted red. And as I said, you know, with the forearms, slightly unfinished in places, whereas this guy does feel more premium as a result, just in that regard. But then you don't have the paint scratch issues and paint rub and whatever other concerns people might have about MP-44 in that regard. I say that though, but actually just looking at it, and I hadn't even clocked this before, but there is already some paint scratches and paint chips on, this is Transform Element, on the little cylinder section on the side of his leg. Quite noticeable actually. Couple of dings, paint scratches on there, whereas actually the chrome on 44 over here is looking really nice indeed. So, Now ultimately what 44 also does do very nicely is that very nuanced articulation that I mentioned earlier. You've got stuff like the butterfly joint at the shoulder just there, which is really good. The arms have got a lot more kind of nuance to them in terms of how they pose. You've got the wrists, the ability to kind of move them back and forth a little bit. It's all little stuff, coupled with the obviously the hip sort of joints as well, but it does add up to quite a bit when posing him. And I often talk about this stuff, and I sometimes feel like people maybe don't quite appreciate what I mean, because until you get these toys in hand, it's really hard to kind of fully comprehend the difference that those little touches make. But just look at these two poses, because realistically, that's the same pose, but the one pulls it off with such aplomb and ease and grace and fluidity and whatever else. The other one, Transform Element in this case, it just doesn't compare. So in terms of posability, without a doubt, MP-44 nails it. It just crushes the unofficial effort in this case. And that's kind of what I was talking about earlier with this slightly static, stoic thing that Transform Element has got going on. It has all the posability that in theory you might want if you're not a big poser like I am. But if all you're going to do is stand it on the shelf, it looks really nice. But if you do like picking up and articulating your toys, or as I do, taking photos of them, there's no question that MP-44 has a little bit more give in it, I suppose. Ultimately, though, they both pose pretty nicely. So I say this to give a really comprehensive overview and comparison of these two toys, not to sort of dramatically say, hey, one is better than the other. My actual opinion, I think you'd be happy whichever way you go. I guess I'm saying that putting the price to one side, of course, because realistically, for bang for your buck, Transform Element, it's a lot cheaper, isn't it? Let's be honest. I mean, just lining the two up price-wise, has to be said that Transform Element have really delivered a quality product in that regard. I mean, you don't get the trailer, you don't get all the bump that goes with the trailer with MP-44. Do you care about that? I don't know, but there you go. And ultimately, I don't think it's my place to tell you which one to buy either. I often try and leave these sort of conclusions, fairly open-ended and let you make up your own mind. I'm not, it's certainly not for me to say, hey, buy this one over the other. I often try and present the positives and negatives of both options, and just as I say, let people kind of decide for themselves. I do think in this regard, there's a lot of good to say about both these toys. Ultimately, they're both great in their own way. So, we're onto a winner. If you're looking for a decent, representation of Optimus Prime in your collection, at least you've got options, right? That's a good thing. And again, whichever way you go, they obviously both fit in really nicely in an official Masterpiece collection. I mean, clearly MP-44, that's what it's designed to do. But Transform Element here does look really, really nice too. And I think he's got the animation look. He fits in really well. Again, the finish is what sets him apart. The unpainted red particularly looks noticeable versus stuff like Sideswipe and even a couple of the other Masterpiece toys, which are all loaded with paint typically. So that in hand is possibly not as easy to discern on camera, but in hand I can see the difference, but still it looks good. And then here he is with a number of mini bots, mostly third party actually, because the only official one here is Little Bumblebee, which is MP-45, which that's a toy to talk about another time. But then you've got Fans Toys Hunk just here, which I've got a video review for on the way as well, so check the channel for that soon. You've got X-Transbots Boost, X-Transbots Toro, Bad Cube Huff, and Bad Cube Grump just there. And again, stylistically, obviously these guys kind of do vary a little bit, but I think Transform Element looks pretty good. And just in case you prefer a bit of a 1985 flair, here you go is the mini bots from that year. You've got X-Transbots doing the Cosmos and the Sea Spray. You've got Fans Toys doing Warpath and Beachcomber, and DX9 Power Glide just there. All really nice toys. And again, Transform Element Op looks great with them. And here's a bit more of a 1985 lineup for you. And before anyone asks, I'm not looking to represent absolutely every character from the cartoon. So, you know, yes, I know Grapple's not in the shot. You don't need to ask me where so-and-so is or whatever else, but you get the idea at least. Here he is with stuff like Masterpiece Ironhide and Masterpiece Ratchet, and again, I think that looks pretty good. Definitely nails that cartoon look. And now with MP-9 Rodimus, which is still a personal favourite figure of mine. I know a lot of people grumble about it, but I love it. And there you go, you can see, again, they blend pretty well. Of course, you might want to see him with a few Decepticons as well, so here he is with Masterpiece Laserwave and Masterpiece Soundwave. And then I'm sure what for many will be an ultimate test, this is him with MP-36 Megatron. And it's a weird one, I guess, because stylistically, obviously, MP-36 goes, I mean, it goes really well with MP-44, and better, arguably, well, certainly than Transform Element here, you know, just on account of the stylistic design and whatever else. You know, they both nail the animation look, but the way that MP36 is put together just fits with 44, you know, better than this figure. But they still do look nice together. I guess it'd be interesting to see if Transform Element ever, you know, unveil any plans to do a Megatron as well. I mean, imagine that, having gone through however many countless third-party Megatrons before we finally got an official one. It would be mad now to think that people might even consider switching back to third-party to represent that character. But yeah, stranger things have happened. Anyway, the too long didn't read version of all of that is that, yeah, I've got a lot of time for this guy in robot mode. I think he's very nice indeed. Let's go ahead and check out the transformation. I'm really intrigued to see this one. And that's transformation done, and I think that was a lot of fun actually. It's quite involved, you know, fairly intricate, but I think it's really interesting because actually everything clicks together quite satisfyingly as you would expect it to. Everything goes in a very defined place, and consequently, although yes, it is fairly lengthy and there is quite a lot to do, it's still fun and engaging. I mean, I really don't mind transformations like that. I actually like complex transformations, and I guess this is in stark contrast to what I was saying during my fairly recent Toy World Freedom Leader review, which of course is another Optimus Prime. It's the Bumblebee movie styled one. If you haven't seen that video, you know, it's on the channel. And that's a really interesting one because that is also fairly complicated, what have you. But it's a nightmare to transform because the clearances are not there. Nothing tabs in very satisfyingly. You kind of end up squidging things together and trying to jimmy it to kind of get it to sit cohesively. And it's just a pain in the ass, frankly. Whereas this, by comparison, is way more satisfying. And arguably, no more complex. It's just more fun to do. And I suppose I explain that a little bit just because, I have actually come in for a bit of flack for saying stuff like this, which I think is bizarre. One chap said to me that fun is just a buzzword. And I mean, fair enough if that's what you think, but for me, fun is an integral part of toys. They're toys at the end of the day. Whether they're intended for children, not for children, doesn't matter. They are supposed to be fun things. I don't want to spend my time transforming something that's a nightmare. But that's nothing to do with the inherent complexity of the design. I expected this to be complex. I expected Freedom Leader to be complex. It's how stuff gracefully slides together, clicks together, and ultimately how satisfying it feels. Toy World, that toy is not satisfying to transform. This is. They're both as complex as one another, arguably, at least in the same ballpark, but this one is better and more fun as a result. Not that there aren't a couple of elements that, gave me pause along the way, but actually the instructions are fairly good. They do miss out one or two sort of, the finer nuances along the way that you have to kind of, scratch your head about, but actually everything sort of clicks and clacks and whatever so satisfyingly, as I say, that it sort of makes up for it, if anything. And it's quite clever. I was a bit nervous about getting these panels in at the sides, but actually it's not too bad, really not too bad at all. Definitely pay attention to the head inside there because already I've got a couple of just small dents in part, on the back of my head. Some of the plastic is a little bit soft in some areas and could, maybe do with just paying extra attention with in terms of clearances, getting the head inside. It all fits perfectly as it should, but just you got to be careful along the way. That's what I would say. But actually, this back section, the legs is really interesting to me. That's the bit that really had my brain going, whoa, this is so cool how it transforms. And just because it's unexpected, really unexpected, and the result looks very clean. I guess the same is true of the front cab section as well. I mean, there's a couple of bits where things inside rotate round 180 degrees. So what was on the back is now on the front, and it's very clever, really, really very clever how stuff lines up, hides away. There's a couple of uses of fake parts and all of that, which, if that's not your bag, but realistically, that's been a thing since MP1, in the official Masterpiece line. So it certainly doesn't bother me to get a result like this. It looks great. I mean, that's pretty clean, right? Like pretty clean on the whole. There's not a lot of kibble there at all, actually. Certainly, I would say even more than most Optimus Prime designs, Masterpiece or whatever, that cleans up exceptionally tidily. Everything packs away, stores away, clips in, and the result looks great. It's still got a bit of the old VFS, or visible foot syndrome, that some of the Optimus Prime designs do have, the old feet hanging off the back there. But, it's okay. It's not too bad. I do wish someone at some point would invent a solution for that, because it seems to be a perma problem. But otherwise, I think this thing looks really good. Front of the cab, again, carries over a lot from the robot mode chest, obviously, the windows, things like that. Unlike MP-44, where they kind of flip round. I do not like these windscreen wipers. Got to be completely honest, not a fan. Better than the ones on Toy World, where that also had articulated windscreen wipers and they were kind of rubbery and soft, whereas these are at least hard plastic, which I do prefer, but still, I mean, or is it fun to be able to move the windscreen wipers? It's not something I need on a toy, frankly, and it just makes me worry about tiny little parts like that, whether they're going to come out or get lost or simply break. Please don't do that on signs. Just mold them in, as far as I'm concerned anyway. That's my personal preference. Do really like the sides of the cab, and actually I think, again, this is one of the best or certainly better, looks for the side of an Optimus cab that I've seen, because that looks like a door, which is not what you often get. That looks like a window, which is not what you often get. And it looks kind of real world, actually, which, is unusual. I hate to say that, but you don't always get that. I remember, even MP1, which I love, MP1 and MP10 to some extent, there's an element of trying to figure out where the door of the cab is and the window and whatever else. It's kind of an approximation, whereas this is really good. The old tyres are rubber there, which I'm sure will delight some people. And again, I do have a bit of paint chipping going on these little cylinders, sadly. Just to get another look at that bed at the back of the truck there, remarkably clean, way more than most Optimus designs, as I say. And that's all on account of how these panels unfold. Like it. You know, so I've got to hand it to them because they've found yet another way to transform an Optimus Prime, classic Optimus Prime cartoon design into this truck that is completely unexpected. It took me you know, certainly by surprise, a couple of elements of it, but I really like how it works. It's very satisfying. It's a transformation I will definitely be repeating multiple times over. I guess the big question then is how that compares to MP-44. Yes, my friends, never question the amount of effort that goes into doing these video reviews, because I have, of course, transformed MP-44 again for a bit of a quick comparison, and you can see them here together. And I do think, actually, just in terms of transformation, that Op Leader does stack up as quite satisfying. I mean, you know, much has been said about MP-44's transformation online, including by myself. I mean, I did a video of the Nemesis version MP-49, you know, quite recently, so you can check out the transformation in action there. But it's still, I enjoy it, actually. I quite enjoy it. And a lot of people say it's a nightmare. I don't think it is. Personally, I think it's, yes, it's very intricate, but it's the same as Op Leader in that at least everything goes where it's meant to. And, you know, as you're kind of clicking away, there's no bit where you're like trying to squidge stuff together and it just doesn't want to go, you know. What it doesn't quite have that Op Leader does is quite the same sense of being intuitive, I suppose. There's definitely bits in this transformation, this is the official toy, where you're scratching your head because, you know, panels just kind of go every which way. And you wouldn't necessarily know where to put them, let's say, just you know, off the top of your head. Whereas, at least with Op Leader, I feel like you've got a fairly decent chance of figuring it out, mainly. As for the result, well, you tell me, which do you prefer? They certainly look quite similar, same as with the robot modes. You know, first glance, you could be forgiven for thinking that one is the other and vice versa. But there is some differences, and it's hard not to say that actually Transform Element haven't given theirs a bit of cleanliness that maybe MP-44 can only aspire to in some senses. So I do like MP-44 a lot in truck mode, but yeah, it's interesting. Now, a lot of that becomes very apparent on the reverse, because again, Transform Element here, very clean. MP-44 notoriously has got quite a lot of kibble stuff going on there, and it does look a bit more messy as a result from the back. That said, I do think I prefer MP-44 over here from the front. Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, I like Transform Element a lot. I think it looks really nice. There's just various elements on MP-44 that work for me. Again, the painted finish in this mode is certainly hard to deny, just because it catches the light really nicely. And then, you know, just the shape of it and the kind of cleanliness from the front, I think looks really good. I think this shiny bumper section and the grille and everything there makes it look a little bit more special. And it's not just the chrome, the shininess, it's just the sort of look of the bumper in particular, and the way it curves around to the side and the proportions of it. I think that looks a little bit better, got to be honest. I do prefer the windscreen wipers looking like that as well. Of course, you can open the doors on this guy if that's entirely your thing. Do you know what I mean? It's a little gimmick, but which you can't do on Transform Element. But still, you know, for what you get for Transform Element, it's really good. I mean, why not just throw in MP-10 in here as well? Do you know what I mean? And get all the comparisons going on. And I think it is funny because really there's much of a muchness here. I mean, you can nitpick little bits of them and say this is better than that and whatever else, but they all look good to my eye. This is why I always laugh when I see people so staunchly defending their option and saying that others are trash and things like that. Realistically, they're all good toys, you know, they've all got their elements to them that are great, they've all got nitpicks that you can find about them, but at the end of the day, choose which one you like and just be happy about it. I don't know, they're all good. Now, of course, one big advantage definitely that 44 and MP-10 both have over this guy is that they come with a trailer, but you can see here these two little tabs, and of course we've got that little hitch accessory that you can just slot in there, and then that will enable you to equip him with MP-10's trailer. And there you go, it just plugs right in just there at the back. I guess if you do have MP-10, then that's a neat solution. If not, then, I mean, if you do have MP-10, are you looking for another Masterpiece Optimus Prime? I don't know. Who's to say? It's an option, at least. I do think that the trailer sits far too far back. I could do with it, you know, less gap here, because that to my eye just looks a little bit strange, like particularly from a sort of side view there, but it's a neat option to have all the same. In terms of other comparisons, you may of course be interested to see them with a couple of the Masterpiece cars. You've got Blue Streak and Hound just here, and of course it looks about as good as you would expect. Now in terms of final thoughts then, there's a lot to like about this release. I really dig the robot mode. I think it's classic Optimus Prime done well. I really like the transformation, and the truck mode looks good too. So two great modes, fun transformation, done well. Quality generally is good. A couple of bits that I would pay definite attention to, like the antenna on the head, a couple of areas, you know, like the windscreen wipers as well, but definitely that head I would watch out for, because I think, you know, it may be prone to a bit of damage during transformation, everything else. But on the whole, I think Transform Element have certainly provided a good alternative, solid alternative to MP-44. If MP-44 is not in your budget, or you just don't like the look of it, definitely consider this guy. For me today, what can I say? It's a toot. So that's Transform Element Op Leader. He really is just Prime. Now I'll put a link to TF Source's listing for this guy in the video description, and I'll be able to get a full photo review up on their blog soon. Otherwise that's it from me, so don't forget to drop me a like if you enjoyed today's video, and have a great rest of your day. TTFN.